Hi there, it's the Hawaiian Shirt Coder here again, and this is another Hawaiian Shorts. In this brief video, we're going to talk about extension methods and why you should consider using them. So let's get to it. So in this Hawaiian Shorts, we're going to discuss extension methods, what they are and what they can be used for. Before we do that, I'll just show you my project that I've created called Extension Methods Demo. It's a simple .NET 7 C# console application. Doesn't do very much at the moment other than assign a string variable, some string with the text "This is an Hawaiian Shorts video on extension methods," and writes it out to the screen. And we'll just test that out. And there we go. So that's all that does at the moment. We'll close that again. We've got one too many read lines, just remove that one so we don't get that next time. So if we go over to my text file, this will walk through the sort of agenda for this short video on extension methods. So what we'll be doing is, what are extension methods? 2, the syntax for creating extension methods, and 3, a series of examples of some extension methods, a little bit contrived but should give you the general idea of what they are. So part 1, what are extension methods? And the answer to that is as follows: they are additional methods without modifying, deriving or recompiling the original class. Or another definition taken from Microsoft Learn is, extension methods enable you to add methods to existing types without creating a new derived type, recompiling or otherwise modifying the original type. Extension methods are static methods, but they're called as if they were instance methods on an extended type. So all that sounds like a load of sort of double Dutch and gibberish, but what this basically means is, we've got a class that has some existing functionality on it. We can write an extension method to provide that with extra methods without having to inherit or do any other sort of clever stuff, and without actually having to change the base implementation's class file at all. We can write an extension class that will plug into this. So if that still doesn't make sense, what you can see in a minute is the examples, which will hopefully cement the idea with you a little bit more. So the syntax for these is always the same, and probably the best way to show you the syntax for an extension method is to start with an example. So my first example is to do with an existing type we've got in the system, data type, which is a string. And what we want to do with the string is to extend it so it has some extra methods that can act upon any string in the system. So if we go to our program.cs class, so one example of a method that exists on any string at the moment is this one. So if we go some string dot toString, so on any string we can, or any sort of type, we can do a toString on it, which will convert it into a string. Returns an instance of a string, no actual conversion is performed. So what we're going to do basically is, for a string field, we're going to add some more methods that are our extension methods to provide more built-in functionality for any sort of string variable. So like I said, these examples will be a little bit contrived, but they'll give you an idea. So one of the examples that I'm going to start with is as follows. is I'm going to have an extension method called remove spaces. So for any string, we'll be able to call the variable name, and we'll have a dot remove spaces, which will take out any spaces in any string that we provide to the system. So let's start on that. So in order to create extension methods, we need to create a new class. So let's go over here and go add class, and the class will be called let's call it string extension methods. That will do, yep. And the key thing with any extension methods is that the class itself must be static. So change this to public static. And any methods that are contained within this string extension methods class must also be static. So we want a method that will remove all spaces from any given string. So we go public static string, because that is the thing that will get returned back from this extension method. We give the method a name, remove spaces. And now this is the bit that is important with all extension methods. All extension methods need to use the word this, because this is the thing that you're working on. So in this case, this will be a string, and then we need to give that string a variable name. So we'll say value. Whenever you see this syntax, this is a good indication that this means that you're working with an extension method. This is the signature you need to create. So this is the string type that you're passing in that you want to apply this extension method to. So for example, back in our piece of code, the sum string is the this that's coming in. This sum string value, please assign to the remove spaces method, or let the remove spaces method work against it. So what I want to do with this is, it doesn't really matter what the implementation is, but we want to make something very simple. Is the value passed in, which will be, this is in the Hawaiian Shorts video, will be in value. So we go value, and then we say value, and then we're going to use the built-in replace method. And we're going to say, whenever you see a space, replace it with an underscore. And that will be our remove spaces method. And then all we need to do is just return the value back to the caller. So value here is what gets placed in here to the thing calling it. So that's all we need to do. This can be as complicated as you like. This is a very simple string example. Let's go and test it out. So back in Program CS, we've got this at the moment that if we run it, types it out as the sentence, nothing's changed. Let's go and apply our extension method to this. So underneath here, I'm going to go console.write line sum string dot remove spaces. And you can see we've got a using statement that is pointing at the area of the system where the extension method lives. So now if we run this up, you'll see the effect of the extension method. So here we go, all of a sudden we've got rid of any spaces and replaced them with underscores. So again, this could be any string, and so we could have another string, string 2, and we can just swap that out there for string 2, and it will behave exactly the same. So all of a sudden we've got a new method we can use on any string in the system. Hello world now has an underscore in it. So not a very useful extension method, but it is an example of an extension method. Let's do another one. Again, a little bit contrived, but just say we want a method on a string that we can use wherever we like that says how many words are in a particular string. So if we go back to our class, I'm going to add another method in here, and I'm going to copy and paste this one in just for brevity, and then walk you through it. So again, it needs to be a public static. This time this method is going to return an integer, which will be the number of words in the string provided. Again, we're saying this, so whatever the variable, the string variable is, will be assigned to the value here. This again is the keyword that makes it an extension method. And then in this implementation, all we're doing is we are splitting the string that comes in by any of these different patterns. So via a space, via a full stop, or via a question mark. And then what we're doing based on that is we're saying how many things are in the char array, what is the length of it, and that's basically telling us how many words there are. So we've done this one. Let's go back over to our program CS. We'll get rid of string 2, so we don't need that anymore. We'll put this back to some string. So that was our first extension method. We're now going to say how many words are in our string. We can say some string dot word, and you'll see it just pops up automatically like any other method in our system. One thing you will notice, if we go say toString at the moment, notice the sort of icon here is a little cube. You can tell extension methods because they look like this. They are a little cube with a down arrow. This signifies it's an extension. So if we just do that, so all of a sudden this method is associated with any string variable. So we can say how many words are in some string. So there should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 hopefully. Let's just try this out. There we go. So there's another string extension that we've created, and like I said, we could parcel this up as a NuGet package or something and use it throughout every single system we've got. We've just extended the string variables capabilities without actually needing to touch the string methods implementation. So these are quite a good thing to use possibly instead of inheritance and things like that, because we've got a nice sort of decoupling away from existing functionality to additional functionality. So that's a string example. Let's try it with something else just to prove that you can do it with other data types. Let's try it with an integer. So I'm going to comment out this example, and then I'm going to close up the spaces because I've got some more examples below. Let's just move that one off screen at the moment. So example 2 with a number. Let's uncomment this. At present all this does is assign an value of 100 to some number which is of type int32 or integer, and then writes it out to the screen. So just 100 gets printed out to screen. Let's just try that. There we go, no surprises. So let's create a new class here. Let's call this integer extension methods. The key things to remember each time is that the class for any extension method needs to be a public static, and then every method inside also needs to be a static. And what we're going to do this time is we're going to create a extension method that for any number in the system we can say, is it greater than some specified number? Again, not a particularly useful example, but just to give you a demonstration. So let's call this public static, and this is going to return a true or false value, and we're going to say is greater than. So in our case, again, it needs to be this, and it's a this on the integer, so in our case is 100, so we'll say, we'll call that value in here. Is it greater than some value that we pass in? Okay, like that. Okay, so all we do here, again, the implementation could be as complex or as simple as you like, is we can say is the value, is 100 greater than the is greater than value. Okay, so that's that one done. Let's go back to the code and let's make a call in our program. So let's do a console.writeLine. Is 100 greater than 101? And then we can say some number dot is greater than, and again you can see it's an extension method based on the down arrow. And you notice we don't need to pass in the first parameter, because the first parameter is some number. That's what this is. But we do need to pass in the second parameter, which is what you're testing it against, which is int is greater than value. So is 100 greater than 101? And this should return false. Let's just try this out. Get an error, and I haven't completed my string properly. Yeah, we need a quote there. Let's run it up again. Is 100 greater than 101 equals false? So we can just try this the other way around. We can say is 100 greater than 99, and this should equal true. Oh, didn't change it here. There we go, so that equals true. So all of a sudden we've got an extension method we can use throughout our system on any integer to perform that particular check. So that's my second example. So I'm going to comment this one out, and then finally I'm going to show that you can use extension methods against your custom types. So this is example 3. And again, the implementation could do anything, but for my implementation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show how you can use an extension method to map between various custom objects. So if you've watched my Web API series where we talk about models and DTOs, this is a common scenario where you need to map between a model to a DTO and a DTO back to a model. There's several ways of achieving that, but one way you could do it is through an extension method. So let me just walk you through the other classes that I've set up for this demo. I've created a models folder, and it has 2 classes in it. It has a person class that has three properties, an ID, a first name and a last name, and I've just overridden the toString method just so I can write everything out in one simple statement. And then we also have a player model, and that's virtually the same. It's just that we have a ID and a full name, so there is no first or last name. So we may have a scenario where we need to map between a player and a person to a player. We need to be able to do it both ways round, and we can use an extension method to achieve that. So if we go back to our program CS, at the moment, if we just do and write out the person, so we've got this person object. If we just write this out at the moment, this is what it looks like. It says ID is 1, first name is John, and last name is Smith. Say we want to convert this person to a player, we can do that with an extension method. So let's create a new extension method over here. Right click, add class. And let's call this extension method object mapper extensions. Fix up the namespace, change this to a public static, and then create our methods. So the first method I'm going to have is going to be called public static player, so that's what it's going to return. And then the method's going to be called toPlayer, and it's going to expect this because it's an extension method, and the thing we're going to pass in is a person, and the person is going to have the variable name of value. So basically we're going to pass in a person and return back a player. We're going to perform that mapping under the hood. So we do that like this, return new player, and we're going to say ID equals the person value dot ID, and then the full name for a player is going to equal a concatenation of the first name and the last name that comes from a person. So value dot first name space value dot last name, and all of a sudden we've converted our object from one object to another. So let's just go try this out. So if we go back to our program and we go now console dot write line, we go person dot to player, and yet again on the to player we can see the little down arrow on the icon of the cube showing it's an extension method, and we can put a semicolon on the end. So if we just go and run this one up, we have an error. I haven't completed my concatenations properly on the end of this. There we go. Sorry, I had a missing bracket. Let's run that up again. So in we come, we hit the, so at this stage we have a person object that has first name and last name. If we hit F11, that should jump us into the method. Here we go, so we come in, we're passing in a person object, and we're going to convert it to a player object. And if we go back to here you can now see that it is output ID 1 full name John Smith, full name spelled incorrectly. Should we just correct that, so that will drive me mad. There we go. So that's let us convert between objects, an object to object mapper in essence. There's other methods within the C# ecosystem for doing that, but that's just one example. And we can do the vice versa of that. So we can map a person, we can import, send in a player object and return it as a person. So let's do that just for completeness. So back to our object mapper extensions, we can create a new method, again public static. This is going to return a person this time, and we're going to call the method toPerson. To make an extension method we need this, and this is of type player, and we'll call that value again. Call it anything you like, I tend to call it value. And then what we're going to do is I'm just going to put a bit of copy and paste in, save watch me type, and then explain it to you. So this is what we do on this one, is we return a new person, and we can map the ID to the player.id. But in order to split out into a first and last name, what we're doing beforehand is we're looking at the full name value that's coming in from the player, and we're performing a split on it based on a space between the first and the last name, which puts it in an array, and we can put the first element of the array in first name and the last element of the array into last name. Admittedly, this is only a demo, so there are possible issues with that if you don't have a space or you have multiple spaces or whatever, but that's not the essence of this video. So let's just go back to the code and just check that this toPerson method works. So then what we can do is, let's just change this slightly. So what we will say is var player equals person.toPlayer. So that always equals a player, and then we'll just put player in here. Just check that still works before we carry on. There we go, so that's still all working as before. Let's also just put a comment in here so it's easier to read on the screen. There we go. Actually, let's just pop this on another line. Not complicate things too much. There we go. And now we want to test out our toPerson method. So we'll just have a CW there, just to create a bit of space, and then another one, and this time we'll go the person object is, and then on here we can just say console, and we can say this time we're going to pass in a player and convert it to a person. So pass in the player object and go to person this time, and that should convert it back again. So we'll put a breakpoint here this time just to try this one out. So we basically started off with a person, converted it to a player, then converted it back to a person again. Rather academic, but should hopefully illustrate extension methods. So at the moment, player is of type player, and now if we go into this method, we come into the static method with a player object, and we're going to convert it to a person object. So the first thing we're going to do is split out the full names. The full name is John Smith, so I should split that out into an array with two elements. First element will be John and the second one Smith, so that allows us to write them into the appropriate properties of a person. F5, go back to our window, and you can see there's our player object and here's our person object, which has got converted back again. So that's another useful thing we can use extension methods for. The wide scope that they can be used for. Use them with care, but a useful thing for your toolbox. So I'm the Hawaiian Shirt Coder. That's the end of this session. Please remember to like, subscribe, share with your friends. Remember, keep learning, keep exploring, keep developing, and I'll see you next time.